Hello and welcome to episode 48 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's ongoing quest to answer the unanswerable question, just what is it that draws people to this infuriating game? On this episode, we're going to meet someone whose impact on the game has been far greater than their profile in the public eye. Ian Triggs is one of the best golf coaches not just in Australia, but the world, and has counted among his students the winners of some of the biggest prizes in the game. Curry Webb, So You're New, John Sendon, and in recent years Elvis Smylie are just some of the names Triggs has worked with. But unlike many of his coaching brethren, you won't find Triggs trying to build a business empire around his success. With 5 children and 12 grandchildren, his life more resembles a daycare centre than a jet-setting golf coach, and that's just the way that Triggs likes it. I caught up with Ian at a suburban Brisbane cafe recently, which explains some of the clanking cutlery and passing traffic that you can hear in the background. But I do urge you to focus not on that, but on what Ian has to say, because out of the ashes of his own derailed golf career come lessons for every golfer, no matter what level you play at. Well, Ian Triggs, the clue's in the title. The Thing About Golf. What's the thing about golf for Ian Triggs?
Nowadays, it's certainly about giving back. I really feel as though that, through my career I've learnt a heck of a lot, been through a lot of dry gullies and good ones, and hopefully I can impart the knowledge gained to a lot of the young players of today.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We'll come to what you've been doing in the game for the last, 15 or 20 years. That's about it. Way back when it started, how did you come to golf?
My father, very good sportsman, played in high-level rugby league, actually went to Manly, but I came...
In Sydney?
In Sydney, right. Yes. So, and basically I came along and that was the end of that. So
you fixed that for him?
Yes, so he headed back home to Grafton, where he went back into the meat industry, and then Dad then took up golf quite late in life, and he took him 2 years to get to scratch.
Wow.
So very, very talented athlete. Basically, I was caddying for Dad, and next minute out in the backyard, and we had a bigger than a backyard because we were based at the Abattoirs in Bundaberg, chipping plenty of room, hit down between the wood stacks. And so, I started golf at the age of 12.
Real golf, not this manicured fairways and
no,
pyramids of golf balls. No. Golf, whack them, go find them, and
that's right. Down amongst all the wood stacks had snakes, and it was always quite a dangerous thing going to collect the golf balls.
But keep you on your toes, won't it? Practice your other athletics as well.
Yes.
You mentioned Grafton at the start there, which is sort of country New South Wales. No, you moved from there up to Bundaberg.
Yes, well, Dad went to Toowoomba. He was there as the second in charge of the meatworks in Toowoomba, and then from there up to Bundaberg as in charge of the meatworks there for 41 years.
So you chipped and whatnot around the backyard. When did you first have your first taste of actual golf? The course and scores and all of those other things aside from just the hitting of the ball.
Yeah, I got into a little 9-hole competition at Bundaberg Golf Club. The pro then was Leo Corrie, and we used to have a little tiny clinic and go and play 9 holes. I can remember having the 3, 5, 7, 9 and a 3-wood and a putter, and away we went.
Something to be said for that as a coach, is there? We
Absolutely.
don't do that anymore.
Absolutely. You should.
Back to that a bit later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So started there, and of course at that stage Bundaberg Golf Club didn't allow juniors. So even though we had that little 9-hole comp, he couldn't join the club. And his daughter Gail Corrie became Australian amateur champion out of Bargara Golf Club. So my whole amateur career was with Bargara.
What impact does that have on somebody so young when somebody else at the club, a fellow member, has a success like that? We see this with players, don't we?
My word.
Somebody they've played with regularly wins something, and that's that message that, well, if they can do it, I can beat them. So if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, so it was really good because you had an Australian champion within the club at Bargara, and basically that really, you could see it there. Her name was all over the honour boards, and it really made you chase it. So
it benchmarks something too, doesn't it, Ian, for
my word.
Particularly young kids from like a rural area. You don't know how good you are. Just because you're the best in the club, you might be the best in the world, but you might only be the best at the club. You can't know, can you, until you've...
No, totally, until you get in the deep end, yes. Till you get to the next levels, yes.
The next lot of golf looks like. So I imagine at that time your thoughts would have been as a player.
Yes, I really loved the game. I really enjoyed playing a lot and...
practicing and all the other aspects
everything,
of it?
yes. I used to... being fortunate having at our home next to the meatworks, having room to chip across the fence. Mum would be hanging out clothes on the line at 5 a.m, and I'd be hitting her in the ankles with chips and what have you. And so I was very fortunate to have that as too. I didn't have to get to a golf course to hit golf balls. Dad set up some nets and things. And so, I was, and Dad was my primary coach. He really, he was reading Hogan's fundamentals, and so basically he was doing that, but being very creative with my learning, getting me to shape shots, and so not a great deal of technique, just the basics, but very smart man in being involved in just what you're going to do with the ball.
He was one of the more highly regarded coaches of the era. How do you rate his coaching looking back of you?
Yeah, well, Dad got me to plus 3.
So
at 15
when
years,
+3 meant something.
+3 at 15 years of age, very creative with the ball flight. Wow, I can't believe how good a coach he was.
Yeah. Is that a natural aptitude? Are you born with that, or?
I just think that through Dad's experience with, he's into tennis, football, rugby league, like I mentioned, and everything else, that he had a real understanding of what games and sport was about.
Okay.
So,
some of that other stuff that's not necessarily about the technique, but more what you've got to do to achieve.
To achieve well, yeah. So he was in tune with that.
Yeah, important lessons. And where did it unfold then from you? What were the options at that time in terms of if you wanted to be a player?
Well, I mean, basically my love of the game was so much that, I said to Dad, I want to be a professional. And back then in sort of in the 60s, it was sort of not thought of that you would actually become a professional golfer.
Touring professional was still a fairly new thing and really an overseas thing, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Mum and Dad supported me entirely. He said, yeah, we'll go for it, rather than me going down the academic route. Yes, I finished senior, but then I was basically, I was really chasing being a professional.
If I'm not mistaken, you would have had to go through the club pro ranks at that time.
Had to do a 3-year traineeship.
Had to do your traineeship.
Yes, had to do a traineeship. But I didn't turn pro until I was 21, so my career really hit the wall at about 19 years of age, and I couldn't find my way back out of it at that stage.
What do you mean hit the wall?
Well, I reckon I was, I was, as a young guy, +3, +4 marker, and then by the time I'd decided to turn pro, I was sort of, I'd probably gone out to a handicap of 2. So I'd lost my way.
That's an enormous difference. What happened?
Yeah, basically, probably my perfectionism, getting involved in state teams and things that I received, information and technique and combined with my perfectionism, probably went down a pretty poor track technically, overdid things.
You've been good enough to make a state team, then when you get there, there's coaches and others around who'll then tell you need to do this and this and this differently.
Yes.
There's a real lot of dangers in that. There's a prime case of it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
What does that sort of do to you then? There's 2 ways you can go if that happens. I assume fairly early on you sort of realise, well, the playing is probably not going to happen. You either walk away from the game or you find a different path. You obviously chose the different path. Was that an option at any point to walk away?
I walked away. I did walk away. I walked away probably at the age of probably 22 after I'd finished my traineeship.
It's devastating, Ian.
Yes, I was pretty devastated because I was a very good player. I played number 1 for Queensland. I was captain of the team. I had people like Greg Norman behind me in the team, so I could really play. Yeah. Then the career really took a really sharp twist the other way. The last interstate series I played, playing number 1 for the state, I won 1 match, whereas the years before I was winning every match and beating players like Roger Davis and Michael Carl, who was Australian amateur champ and became an Australian PGA champion as well. So, my career as a player really took a sharp smack in the mouth.
Do you remember something specific happening?
I think it's just a combination of, I think the technique back then was fairly average. We basically listened to what players wrote and felt. We didn't actually have a manual of ideals that should be coached in golf. And it still goes on a bit today. But we're a lot more worldly now. We've actually been able to go through and pull all different swings to bits and understand why they work. Whereas in those days there was, drive your legs, high hand finish, flat left wrist, all sorts of things that were, keep the head still, keep the left arm straight, all this sort of stuff that was actual, push towards sort of everybody, where in actual fact you can't do that. You need to teach the individual and understand what their movement and everything is going to produce, so that you can blend that individual and not interfere with their natural fingerprint and talent.
At various times in golf's history, there's been beliefs about the way to swing the club.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're talking about? And are we now? Do we now know that there is no the way to swing the club?
Absolutely, there is no way to swing the club. It belongs to the individual. Every one of us is a different size, different length arms. Everyone's different, and you can still play the game with extremes within the pattern, as long as that extreme matches the ball flight that player wants to play with. And once you start messing with it, you destroy the reference system of that individual, especially if they've started at a young age and they have this, it's the way they walk. So you go in there and put a model in place that actually may suit the...
So is what we've discovered then, Ian, that there is actually no the way to swing?
Yes, that's the truth. There is no the way to swing. Basically, there's an ideal model that we should look at and see why the ideal model works, but there's so many different ways of being close to the model to still produce ideal outcome for that individual. And basically they'll all play with slightly different flights, and there's so many different ways of producing that flight.
We'll come back to this a bit later, but I'm going to plant the seed now and I'll get you to answer the question a bit later. How much of success in golf is the golf swing physically versus other factors, as part of other factors? I'll get you to ruminate on that for a bit, because I want to come back to your story. But that's a question that I'd like to sort of answer, because I wonder sometimes if the better you get as a player, the more importance you place on the swing, and is there a point where you place too much importance on the physical action compared to some others? So I'll get your thoughts on that a bit later. But I want to come back to you. So at 22, you'd had this devastating realisation of... So what did you do?
I bought a milk run.
Of course.
As you do.
What was I thinking? In Bundaberg?
No. Here in Brisbane. So, bought the milk run and got out there and got dreadfully fit.
It was actually a run back in those days too, wasn't it?
It was an actual run.
What were your feelings about the game? Were you bitter towards the game at that time?
No, I don't think I ever got bitter. I was very, very disappointed, very couldn't believe where I'd finished up compared to where I was, probably 5-6 years beforehand. So it was quite a rude awakening. I'd course records and stuff everywhere, and lots of success with the game as an amateur, and a few good results as a pro in one-day events. But combination of where I was technically, and combination of my perfectionism, combination of losing my confidence entirely, just totally destroyed me. So I was still thinking about it all the time, even though doing the milk run for a couple of years.
And when you say you were thinking of making a comeback, or finding just something else in golf to still be near the game?
Well, I just said to myself one day, I was out in the run, midnight, running around.
Good time to think, actually. It's probably not a bad job to have.
Only annoying thing out there is dogs.
Yeah.
But, yes. But eventually I thought, I'm going back, I'm going to find out why. That's what I set upon from the failure, that I wanted to go back and find out why. And, by the time I'd reached 35, I'd actually found the answers, both technically and mentally, what had happened. And sort of then I felt as though I was on a mission not to allow any other people to go down that track. That's the sort of thinking that I had.
So you've kind of answered in a way one of my questions, which was going to be what draws you then to coaching. So it's to sort of stop this from happening to others. What was the realisation you came to? So you're running around at midnight and you think, I need to get back to the game? What did you do? Buy what's the book that I'm thinking of? The Crazy Homer Kelly book, the golfing machine. Did you go down that path? Did you read everything?
No, I really didn't. I just, being very fortunate, married to a physio, I certainly went and talked with Sue and my wife about, what should be going on physically. And
was there much of that happening at the time? It's very common in golf these days. They build the players' bodies, don't they, from a young age, just to play golf. That certainly wasn't the case.
No, not back then. And we, actual fact, myself and Michael Dalglish started in 1980. We started that sort of process probably throughout the country. We had kids from Kelvin Grove that were very successful. We won the world title 2 years in a row, the Kelvin Grove High School. At St Andrews they won, and so we were doing a lot of the physical profiling and adding the technique to it. So we got to a stage where I could sit opposite the table with Michael and he'd say, the traps are firing too much, this is going on, that's going on. And I'd say, well, if that's happening, this will be happening in the golf swing. So we were starting to recognise the facts of how the technical was very much affected by the physical. And so we went down that track very much with the Kelvin Grove High School. We had a very broad thing that was going on. And then we had Ross Herbert come up from the AIS, and he was watching our program and seeing what we were doing, and that pretty much started that whole scenario of profiling athletes and seeing what patterns are produced. That's right on the cutting edge in the beginning of what we see now as commonplace in top golf, isn't it? Absolutely. What was it like to be a part of that? Did you know that you were doing something special at the time, or was there a possibility you were going down all the wrong rabbit holes here? No, it was very interesting. It was something was really showing up things about why certain aspects were happening, and so it was exciting. I mean, we got the balance of the body better for the younger guys. We could see the improvement in their ball striking and everything. So it was a real great time for coaching. Exciting time. You're seeing results like that. Were there skeptics in? There must have been skeptics. Yes, well, there was. Back in those days, the pattern was you had to, the pattern was in to out. You had to drive your legs, and the path worked in to out. And then when we started getting some quieter aspects of happening in the golf swing, and the swing was working more in to in its path, and the face was not being closed as much because of the excess of the other path. I was called a radical coach for a while, and how did that sit with you? I felt pretty happy because she went to Rachel Hetherington, one of my favourite students who I started with at a very young age, went to New Zealand and won. It was headline, player with radical swing wins New Zealand Open. You're kidding me, aren't you? So it was certainly very different at that stage. That wouldn't sit comfortably necessarily with everybody, I'd imagine. No, you would have been getting a lot of quite well-respected people telling you, you're ruining careers, it's dangerous what you're teaching these young people. Yeah, very, very much so. That was going on. I mean, and Ledbetter was going well in the States at that stage. He'd certainly made some noises over there, and in regard to the model of the swing that we should be sort of getting close to. Yeah, so it was an interesting time. Yeah. In hindsight, where did those misconceptions come from? Are they so? For example, Weiskopf, Miller, Nicholas. I think about that sort of thing. Were they kind of outliers in being able to produce that action and produce that ball? You had a guy like Weiskopf who swung it so good. I think America was a little ahead of where we were, even though, there's still very much players in America. They still weren't as technical as probably what we were in the States. There's so many players that it's all about scoring up there, in America, So I think that here we, as a smaller nation, we really had to, help refine the patterns of our youngsters to be able to compete more. We only had a handful, whereas America's got thousands that are competing. But I think that's why the VIS with Stevie Bann and those guys was so successful, because they did such a great job with their coaching in that era, because they had only a handful of students that they could put great energy and great information into, and we got great results with Appleby and Ellenby and those sorts of dudes. They became very good players. Yeah. Those pathways then started to establish, didn't they? My word. What those players did on the back of that coaching set the pathway for players that we still see today. My word, yes. They sort of understand those things. For you, were you doing all of this? And I imagine at this time it's just a journey of discovery. Some of what you learn's not going to be right, some's going to be fantastic. Yes. Did you project forward at that time and think about where this might go and what it might be about? What was your or did you just roll with this great adventure that you were on? Yeah, pretty much just rolled along. I mean, I was also doing work with, I went and did some work with Dr. Noel Blundell, who really helped give another perspective in the thing. So I was looking both... psychologist. Yes, sports psychologist. Both. A very good one too. Yes, he is. Yeah. So basically I was doing work in the physical and the mental areas, and really getting a good understanding. And I had a couple of young guys, young fellow pros who were very good. Ken Burnt, exceptional in understanding technique. And so, I was very fortunate. I had some really good information coming in and being able to keep refining the patterns and
that time, Ian, was the thinking that the coach's job was to work purely with the physical? Were you stepping outside the norm, for example, by working with Noel?
Yeah, I probably was. I never looked at it that way, but, I used to go to the tournaments and watch him work on the range. I was there with the tournament that Roger Davis won when he won the Centennial.
Oh, what an event that was.
Incredible
what a win
event.
For him.
Yes.
Yeah,
if you've seen Roger on the first day, on the Monday in the practice round, he could hardly take the putter back.
Really?
Yes. And I watched...
Is he going to be upset with you for telling us that?
No, I don't think so. I think he'd be quite proud of being able to beat Freddie Couples with that putt at the last. But to think that he could actually, at the end of a week, on a Sunday, on those slick greens at Royal, hold that putt across that green to win was like mind-boggling to me, to see that the work that Noel did and the simplicity of what he was doing to get Roger in the right place was like, wow. So I was lucky enough to be walking with him and watching. And
was that a realisation for you? As a physical coach, for want of a better term?
My word.
You're thinking, well,
yes,
we'll fix his hands on the club and that'll get it to him and then it'll be fine. But in fact, that must have been a revelation for you. That
it was, because we'd be walking around and Noel would go, this guy's about to hit a poor shot. And I'd go, what? And lo and behold, bingo, the guy would hit a poor shot. So I said, what are you watching, Noel? He said, I'm watching body language. I'm watching eyes. I'm watching, how the athlete's looking comfortable or not. And I can see that his thoughts are in the wrong places. And I was going, oh, wow, I've got a lot to learn here about body language and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, you can see how fortunate I was to actually be around that, watching elite athletes and watching Noel's perspective of what was coming up. So,
to your credit to take that on board, though, there are still players today who are sceptical about the value of psychology and sports psychologists and the way you think about the game. So
yes.
I'm sure most coaches at that time would have considered it to be...
Well, you were just sort of, what are you doing? Fancy, you're crazy.
Happy, hippie, crazy nonsense. Golf's about hitting the ball.
Yes. Well, my dad used to say to me, he said, I went to see Noel and he said, you need to get a jacket on. I said, one of those white ones? He said, yes. So, yeah, that's what it was thought of in those days when we were young guys. I mean, that was, look, I think in most areas it can be, there's a balance with everything, and certainly some good stuff from that area can really help a player.
In some ways, I guess this touches back, and let's answer that question now on what's the importance, not that you can put percentages on it, but put some percentages on it for me. How important is the golf swing versus aptitude versus attitude, I guess, is what I'm asking here.
Yeah, I think the whole game is totally mental. I really do. I think it's...
Once you get to a level...
There's a level of a skill development you must have if you want to compete at the highest level. But once you get to that level, it all becomes totally, your discipline in behaviour and involvement.
The physical becomes maintenance, doesn't it? You maintain
the physical, you maintain the technical, and the rest of it's just you've got to stand up there and deliver.
Yeah. Is it the case now that you'll deal with some of that as well as the physical, or do players now have separate coaches for sports psychology? It's a tricky area, isn't it? Because a player, obviously, if you're a good player, and you'll hear good players say this, why would I take advice from him? He can't even beat me.
Yes, totally. Yes, well, I think, certainly in my teachings now and my coaching now is basically there's a large percentage of the mental aspects going on. I see I got a lot of very good young players at the moment, and
Elvis Smylie among them, who I think, Australian golf fans,
yes,
he's a very exciting prospect.
Yes, so it's quite funny. The other day, he said, "Can you have a look at my chipping?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I can." He said, "You never say anything." And I said, "Hit a couple of chips. Oh, you go, hit that flag over there. It finishes 3 inches away. Hits another one a foot away." I said, "Do you want me to say anything?"
What do you want me to say? I'll just send you an invoice. We'll do that.
So, he said, "Oh, wow." I said, "Yeah, well, if there was something I felt was not good, but your mental work's great, your involvement's good, you got your mind in the right place, you've got a great feel for what you're doing, I said, if I add any information to that, I'm going to, destroy you, and that I don't need to do that.
How hard is it sometimes not to say anything? There's almost what I'm doing here with the podcasting. You're terrified of silence. If there's any sort of silence, you feel like you need to fill it. I imagine sometimes in coaching it must feel the same way. I've got to tell this player something. That's what they're paying me for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true. I think what I try to do nowadays is just to say, look, you're in a great place. You need to be really creative with what you're doing. You need to hit different shot shapes and get out in the course and play as much as possible, learn as much as you can, but I'm not giving you any technical information because I'm happy where you're at. Look, if someone's heading down a track where they're biomechanically unsound and there's going to be chances of injury down the track, well, you need to step up to the plate and warn them of those chances of occurring, and which, I never had that knowledge way back, but certainly I think that's a thing you need to do as a coach. But
starts to beg the question, doesn't it? What is the role of a coach? In some ways, it was much simpler in the 60s. The coach was the person who said, put your hands here and get into this position and do that. It's much bigger and a little more murky than that these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you've really hit a nail there, Rod. I think a lot of coaches are uncomfortable because basically they were now coaching because they basically had a model before that they trotted out all the time.
It's parameters. There's boundary lines. It's quite straightforward.
Yes, totally. But now they go, wow, they look at Dustin Johnson swinging a golf club and they go, oh, what should I be teaching? So it's very difficult if they don't have a knowledge in regard to how it works mentally and the reference systems that each individual uses, then they're going to struggle with their coaching because they're just going to keep putting out stuff that basically interferes with individuals when they try to get rid of the extremes of that pattern. So
somebody once famously said, if Dustin Johnson had got to a coach sooner, he'd be winning a club championship somewhere.
Absolutely.
They'd have fixed his left wrist and he'd be winning a club championship somewhere. That would have been... There is truth to that, though, isn't there? And that's...
You destroy him in 5 minutes if you really wanted to. I mean, the guy's laid back and doesn't care one little bit. But if you went in there and changed and got that back to, say, an ideal pattern, you've got yourself a club champion, yes. Yeah.
He'd win by a few, but it'd still just
I don't know about that.
Just be a club championship. So then, so what is the role of the coach? Are you your mentor, friend, disciplinarian, psychologist? The only thing you're not is the caddy, and the caddy's got to be all those things too, don't they, at the top of professional golf?
Your caddy's got a very important job. They really do have, and they've got to be careful not to interfere as well. I mean, you've got to be able to read the player and know when to say something and when not to. And
which is different for every player.
Absolutely.
There's no textbook for that, is there?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Well, and you've obviously worked with a lot of name players that people will recognise. Just a little run through of the list of players you've worked with. And how many years have you been sort of coaching for? 30? You mentioned Rachel Hetherington already. Well, that's already dated things a little bit. I covered Rachel Hetherington as a younger man too. Yes.
Yes. Really, when I first got my first real serious player was Pete Senior. So I coached Peter for a long time, from the late 70s right through till probably nearly 20 years of coaching with Peter.
Very unorthodox action. You did that sort of lifting at impact sort of looking thing. An extraordinary player, but.
Yeah, well, when Pete first started, his grip was left-hand grip was under the club, very, very weak position, and he used to go back and then he'd actually cup it into the top. So his club face in the top was so far open. So on the way down, he would jump to basically be able to get the club face back to square. So at that stage, I never touched anything. I just let him play like that. And, there are a few guys saying, well, why aren't you making some swing change?
He was an extraordinary player back then. When Michael Clayton says that when they were juniors, there was Peter Senior, Daylight second and third, and then there was some of the others in the
Absolutely.
field.
So, in 78, he won the Triple Crown. He just, such a great player, Peter. And, had trouble with the putting. So, we had the long putter. Sam Torrance gave him a long putter. And so with Peter, he then developed thumb and wrist problems. So that was the first change we made. We made a grip change back to close to conventional left hand. And then we started to get his backswing tidied up a fair bit. We actually did some work there to get it not so much inside and slapping up and then coming up the back. And so eventually we just did some little work to keep going and keep being creative while he was doing it. And we didn't do any damage, even though we had to make some changes because of the physical aspects that were going on.
He's been on the podcast too, Pete. What a wonderful gentleman.
Yeah, great
he is.
guy.
You know, still a professional's professional.
My word.
Even though he won't like you saying he's kind of retired, but he doesn't want to admit it.
No, he doesn't.
He'll never hang him up. So Pete was probably further. I know you've worked with Say On You and John Sandon.
Yes.
Harry Webb.
Yes.
Rachel Hetherington you've mentioned.
Yes.
Smiley that we know. I've probably missed a whole bunch in there.
Yeah, well, Mo Martin won...
oh, wow.
Won a British...
one of the great shots in the history of the tournament.
My word. Uni G won a US Open as well, Women's Open. So, yeah, I have one young lady who won four events on the Korean LPGA in a row, and I was there for every one of the wins. Now I can't even think of a name. How am I travelling?
It's like, not disparaging, it's like a great golfer's factory, that Korean LPGA, isn't it?
Oh, yes, without a doubt.
Staggering.
Yes. So Q Beck was her name, and Q actually had some troubles with her back, and she was getting treated all the time. But then her dad decided to get surgery done. I said, no, don't no surgery, please. You know, bring her out to Australia. I'll get her with the leading surgeons or leading people and see if there's anything we can do with exercise and what have you. But he went ahead, and she went from 11 to the world to not even playing. So
best name in golf, a single letter Q. Q Beck.
Yes.
I watched her play down at the Vic Open, I think.
Yes, so
phenomenal player.
Great player. Yeah, so really enjoyed working with her. She was a really bubbly, down-to-earth individual who could really play. But yeah, career finished very quickly.
Which can happen to almost anybody, kind of. We
My
forget
word.
golf as a sport, but it doesn't take much.
Certainly
a wrist,
Yep.
a knee,
Yes.
an ankle.
Yep.
It's all crucial in this, this modern, very physical sort of game. All of that, Ian, is success. That's success. You're working with the very best players in the world. They're having success. They're winning the biggest events. Is that what success looked like to you?
Not necessarily. I mean, I have success, lots of times with just the club members. And
Do you still work with a lot of
Oh, yes, I do.
double-digit handicap players?
Yes, I do. Anyone who, wants to spend some time with me, I'm just there, ready. I love it. So
it's a sickness, don't you? To go from coaching US Open winners to 27 markers, that's an illness.
Yeah, it's basically just being able to help people. They're really struggling and trying to get better at a very difficult game. So it's a real thrill being able to have hopefully a couple of little keys that you can help that individual with.
Success breeds success as well. And then it starts, and we see this a lot with golf. One player has success, now everybody wants to go and work with that player's coach.
Yes.
Which doesn't say anything about the quality of the coach either way, I don't think, necessarily. We see these trends in golf.
You do, yes.
Players are fickle, aren't they?
Very much so, yes.
We see this with Brad Hughes at the moment, who's having great success with a lot of players, working with a lot of players.
Yes.
Brad's a fabulous bloke and a former player. Do you have to be careful of that? We saw this happen with Ledbetter, I think, a bit in the 80s and 90s. He became the guru,
yes.
which Harmon's probably had a bit of that over the years, though, from a different sort of a background. Do you sense that, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I haven't really gone down that track. I basically...
Could there be Ian Triggs golf schools all over the world, should you want it to?
No, I don't want that to happen, to tell you the truth. I'd rather just have the individual contact with players, and I've been more of a, just dealing with each one individually. That's how I've been. So I don't know. I just don't feel as though I have the systems to go and do that. I'm more of a one-on-one individual with it.
Why you do it, perhaps, would be the answer to that question. I'm sure you could do it.
Yeah, I think it's available to you. I think you can. You can,
I would go to an Ian Triggs school in Sydney, I'm sure.
Yes, yep. But I just feel as though you once you do that, so much education you've got to give the coaches to actually go and have the same passion and the same want and desire to...
You have to trust them implicitly, don't you?
Absolutely.
It's your name.
Absolutely.
So they have to be 100% in line with what you think.
Yes, and I just don't think... It just takes so many years to understand an individual when they come for a lesson and be able to look at them and see their personality and not only just their golf swing, but there's a whole myriad of things there that you need to be aware of to...
What sorts of things? What do you look for? If I came to you for a lesson, what would be the first thing that would happen?
Well, basically, I just start talking and just see where you're at and what you're wanting from the game, and just seeing, whether there's a lot of high anxiety going on or whether there's a calmness there, and lots of times just giving them a different routine rather than and getting them to go out and get their mind quieter and do a better job out on the course can actually save them 10 shots around, let alone going in and starting to mess technically. So there's just giving them a better knowledge of how to play the game in lots of ways rather than, just messing technically.
Dan Cullen once told me that he could tell you if somebody could play golf by watching them walk to the tee. Is that true?
Yes and no. Yes, you can see some good athletes, but then there's a couple that'll come along that
surprise
you. Yep.
They fall over on their way to the tee, then strike one down the middle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're back to that question about the swing, I guess, and the other elements. I'm not sure we ever really answered it. Is there anything in that, what I'm sort of suggesting there? Do people get obsessed with the swing as the key to success and ignore other things that are perhaps at least as or maybe not more important?
Yeah, I think you need to be, the two things that needs to happen. You need to become your own best coach. You need to understand your golf swing and why it doesn't work, why it does work. And then you need to get an understanding of when you do quality mental work, why you hit it so well. So there's lots of people out there who, there's some average patterns out there that are being very successful through the process of high quality mental involvement and letting their instincts work.
Is there an example that we might immediately connect with? Is there a player we could think of that's perhaps unorthodox but been successful? Yeah,
I mean, you're basically looking at someone like Dustin Johnson. I mean, how he could ever pitch a ball was just quite amazing, but with the bowed wrist aspect that he has, the club face is way shut, and he was such a bad pitcher when he first came out there, but he's found a way through just visualization and having total trust in what he's doing to still be able to pitch the ball very, very well. So you think, how can that happen? Technically you'd want the face a lot more neutral than that, and you'd want to be able to present it, consistently. But when it's so shut like that, fine in dynamics, you can unwind your body strongly and hold the face off and play with a fade like he does, but how did he get that good at pitching? So there's got to be some real mental things going on there to be able to achieve that. So he has a great feel for what he wants to do with the flight, and he has a great feel of impact relative to that flight, even though his mechanics are poor. So
he couldn't explain that, could he? If you asked him, he would have no concept of any of the things you're talking about.
Absolutely, because he just goes and plays.
I'm going to hit that shot.
I'm going to hit that shot.
That's all I need to do is think about that shot, and I can hit that shot.
He doesn't know that he actually has it so shut, and he makes a major recovery on the way down to fix it all up and produce the flight he wants.
And planting the seed in his mind that he's doing that.
I think it'd be dangerous.
Isn't it? It's the path that you probably were taken on. Somebody told you something about your swing that you need to fix that because it's doing that. And now you're not thinking about what you want to do, you're thinking about what might be going wrong.
Absolutely. So I think that's very important that people, all people, not just players, but everyone gets, if they've reached the stage of development, they've got a pattern that works pretty well on most occasions, they need to understand their own swing and why it produces the flight it does, and then they can get down to doing the high quality involvement, really picturing the shot, really feeling the shot, and then having their mind so quiet and they've got great clarity with their eyes, they can actually see the ball. And if you can see the ball during the swing, I mean, we've all talked about watch the ball. I mean, it's the most critical factor in golf. If you don't see the ball on the way down, your mind will not be able to retain the shape of the shot, will not be able to retain the target. Once your mind is busy, you lose that awareness. You lose it. So,
is this true of all players or only of good players?
Everybody.
So if I'm off 20, these same basic principles apply.
My word.
What do you mean by see the ball? Now I'm intrigued.
Yes.
You see the ball during the... You must see the ball. You're looking down at the bloody thing.
No, you don't, because what happens to a majority of people is our brains are so busy, we're trying so hard, we're living in a lifestyle where we're so running around in circles, so busy that we don't know how to have single thoughts. Our mind is so crazy, racing around everything all the time. We're made busy by all the modern phones and everything. basically, if you have clarity and you've got quietness mentally, you will see the ball on the downswing. You'll see it in transition and you'll see it on the down. But I can bet that majority of players who play today, whether they're 26 marker or a 2 marker, they don't see the ball in transition because their mind's so busy, they're looking at it but they can't see it. There's a blackboard across the eyes.
There's a difference between looking and seeing.
Absolutely.
Like there's a difference between hearing and listening. It's
Absolutely.
the same sort of idea,
sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. Can you work on that? Can you?
Oh, yes. You need to train on that. And that's the very thing that Dr. Noel did with Roger Davis. He spent all day, I was there with it. We'd mark the ball with a little dot, put it down with a dot up, and Roger would hit the ball watching the little dot. And we just did that all the time. So he's getting his mind as quiet as possible, seeing the dot, and all of a sudden everything, and then on the putting green the same thing, getting involved very well, very quietly, and then seeing the dot bang and trusting the instincts, trusting the patterns.
Allow the talent you have to do the job that it can do. Totally
reactive, totally instinctive.
Yeah, that's amazing. If I'm not mistaken, did not both Michael Campbell and Ernie Els not long before winning majors got involved in some eye exercises? A lot of work with the eyes. I'm sure Ernie did.
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't remember.
Tracking, working on the eye muscles. And
yes.
Really quite extraordinary. And I'm sure Michael Campbell's talked about it being the difference between winning that US Open, being able to hold on until the end and going. These are things we never think. We don't read this in the magazines, Ian. We don't read it in the golf coaching books. No. Surely what we need is to get the club in position here, and it's got to be on plane there, and face it, and the wrist has to do that. That's the key to good golf, isn't it? This stuff you're talking about, it's all hippie nonsense, isn't it?
Not at all,
Is this what you work on with tour players?
Oh, my word.
Wow.
In fact, I'll talk to you about a player in 6 months' time. Not now.
Once you fix them? Do you see a lot of that? Players with extraordinary talent that have got themselves in perhaps a bad pattern or a bad path or a bad mental space who's...
Without a doubt. I mean,
like what happened to you by the sound?
I just see so many like that, yeah. It's highly talented athletes can do anything with it, and then when they go out to play, it's like, who is this player? They're just not in the right space, and they don't know how to get there.
Is it fear? Is it as simple as fear or an emotion?
Look, there's both combined. They don't have a great deal of trust in their patterns, in their swing pattern, so they then start blaming the swing all the time, and they never really get to be aware, first of all, of where they were mentally during that shot or shots. And so they always going back to, like you said, it's the swing that's the problem, when in actual fact it's not at all. Because the brain fixes up the 1 degrees. The incredible thing about the brain, if you're going to stand up there and hit a little draw or a little fade at elite level, they're so in tune and such highly wired that they can produce it so easily. But if they're there and they're working on technique, they can't produce it.
Fairly certain Brad Faxon. Now, what was it? Golf's not a game of perfect. Bob Rotella talked about watching the television with Faxon, and Faxon that he had no idea about opening and closing stances. If he wanted to hit a draw, he'd just hit a draw.
Yes,
he would do all of those things.
Oh, my word!
But he wouldn't do them to produce a draw.
No,
he'd just want to hit a draw, and his body would react.
Automatically do that. Absolutely.
There's an order and a sequence of things, isn't there? Yeah.
My word.
Dustin Johnson obviously does it instinctively, doesn't it? As you say, he's got no right to hit a golf shot of any quality from the position he has at the top.
Absolutely.
And yet he's been the world's #1 player for
a fair while now.
Some considerable time. What about playing the game, Ian? There's personality about that, isn't there? That the playing of the game is not really about the hitting of the shots. It kind of is, but the way people express themselves and play on the golf course. Say your news a completely different character to Elvis Smylie. Or most of the other players you've worked at. What do you work on in those areas, or do you work on anything?
No, not really. I just try and let them be themselves, basically. And, you mean in way they attack the golf course?
Yeah, the way they play. So if you think of Scott Hend, just an extraordinarily aggressive player.
Yes, totally. Yeah, yes.
Totally to his detriment at times. And often enough that he's made a living playing the game and done very nicely.
Yes.
And that suits him. Phil Mickelson's probably a prime example. How many times has he been told, be more conservative, don't play the risky, crazy shots, you'll have won a whole lot more? Is that true, or does Phil need to play like Phil, or he can't play at all?
I think that's the truth. I think he's got to play like Phil, because basically he'll win one week and miss the next 3 cuts, and that's what he's done his whole career. when he gets it together and he's in the right space and got trust and belief that given week, he's damn impossible to beat. And give him a shot that's impossible to play with a flop shot, and he'll hit it to 2 feet. He's an amazing individual. Yeah,
he's on the PGA at 50 years old. Good Lord, you can't speak highly enough of what an achievement that is.
Phenomenal.
Those of us who've gone past 50 have an understanding of
what
that is as an achievement. I've heard it sometimes said of Greg Norman, and I think it's probably true sometimes of Bubba Watson. You can confirm whether this is the case. The most difficult shot for players with that much talent, and Mickelson might be the same, is the extremely straightforward 9-iron. No requirement to do anything.
Yeah.
The more obstacles you put in their way, the more focus they get and the better they play.
Absolutely.
Anything in that? And where does that come from, do you think?
Well, basically, you just have to do more homework. When you've got a really tough shot, I mean, I've seen it with all the athletes I've worked with, is that basically you give them a 2-foot hole up through the trees, really difficult. They've got to, hit a ball up high through that gap. And the work they do mentally behind is like unbelievable. Like the involvement, the feel work, you can see it pouring off their body. And bingo, they pull it off. Bang, straight through the gap on the green, great shot. Fair in the middle of the fairway, wedge, just a nice simple 90-metre shot. Don't do anywhere near the creative involvement and feel work that is required. And they hit it to 15 feet, 20 feet, and they're really angry with themselves. But they just haven't done the creative quality work to produce it, the outcome that they're after.
The mental pictures are so, the higher up you go in the game, the better you get, the more important they become, don't they?
Absolutely.
You have to have a picture of what
Yes. And a related feel. You've got to, so the more, it's more of a surprise to see them hit a simple shot close than a really difficult one. You get into real trouble, and some of the shots when I was working, I can remember Pete Senior at the Huntingdale, he hit it down the right side on 18 into trouble the year he won.
Which one? He won a couple of them.
Yes, I know. And
the one he won when he was 56? Wasn't that a feat? Goodness me.
Unbelievable, yes. And that was his early one when he was challenging, when Greg and him were going head to tail, bashing one another out there. So it was exciting to watch. And he hit it in the rubbish. And I walked past the ball and thought, there's no way you can get that out. Bang, on the green. You just go, not possible. But they just have that ability to work out what they're going to do, and then to actually do it. Yeah.
I saw him hit a similar one at Terry Hills in the Cannon Challenge, which he won a bunch of times as well, from down the left-hand side of the 17th. The ball was legitimately dead.
Yes.
It was a drop.
Yes.
He took a 2-iron and smacked it on the green somehow. I was like, how did you do that?
I know. Just unbelievable.
That's why they're them, and we write about them.
That's right.
You could have been them, though, Ian. When you look back, could you have been? Sounds like you were good enough, young enough, but you had the tools. There's no guarantees in this game. You would have seen 100 can't-miss kids in your time, and that's a very dangerous thing to lump onto people. But could you have been? Do you ever lament?
I don't think when I look back at it, I just think my perfectionism, probably a little bit over the top.
All good players have that, though, don't they?
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, perfectionism creates champions, but it can also destroy them.
Tiger's taken his swing apart 3 times and put it
Yes, I know.
The first one was pretty good.
Yeah. I don't know I ever touched it. I remember watching him at 19. But no, I just think also my emotional control just wasn't good enough. It would have taken me a while to stay out there to get that better. Questionable. Certainly at the age of 15, and early in my interstate stuff, playing against all the best players in the country, I handled all that. I was winning all the matches. But as soon as it's hard to know. As soon as the wheels fell off, I certainly didn't
change path.
Yes, I couldn't get back there at that stage. But like I said to you, when I went up to my old home club when I was 35. They had the Pro-Am up there, 36 hole, and I went up there and shot 66, 65, finished second to Pete Senior. So I thought, well, okay, I've found a lot of the answers that I was missing at 20. Yes.
Partly answered my next question was, what's your relationship with the game now?
Look, I don't play a great deal now. I've got,
by choice or?
Well, a very busy life. I have 5 children and 12.
You need to set up those schools. You can't afford 5 children. They cost a fortune.
And 12 grandkids.
Wow, that's a Christmas.
Yes. So basically we got a beautiful, large family.
You're a daycare centre is what you are.
It feels like that at times. Yeah, so no, we're very, very, very fortunate. And I'll try to start playing a little bit more, I think, towards next few years. But, but at the moment, pretty busy.
Yeah, indeed. Do you ever lament? These are sort of impossible questions to answer, but it's nice to explore these things. Do you ever lament what could have been or what might have been? You've had this life in golf, which has been an extraordinary one. It's been fantastic. Do you ever wonder what if it could have been?
Yeah, I would have loved to have found out. Yeah, but it wasn't meant to be. But I would have loved to have found out whether, I can always remember in one of the comps we had at Bargara, one of the young guys who was one of my friends who we trained and competed together a lot, and he was a 4 handicapper and I was on plus 3, and he went out and shot 66 in the morning, and I said to my dad, Dennis can't do that. I'm better than that. I'm going to shoot 65 to Saab, and that's what I did. So
he won the net.
He won the net by the next suburb. At that stage, I was, I look at Elvis and I just see this, this incredible strength mentally, and the way he can. Okay, I'm going to go and do this, and I had that back then. But I certainly lost it very quickly.
If you have anything that's a bit different, I think of Jim Furyk, Dustin Johnson we've already talked about, Matthew Wolff, you need to have a certain amount of intestinal fortitude to withstand, because it doesn't take long for people to start giving you advice, does it?
It's just on every corner. I mean, that's the hard part. You've got to have no ears, and I think that was the other problem for me, is that basically if someone said, do this, jump 1 foot, I'd jump 12 feet. So, I was... just always overdid things as well in my training. So those guys have got to just have so much inner strength and so much trust within themselves to not listen.
Yeah.
Just go about their own.
Part of that champion's mindset, I guess, which is why there's only a few of them. No.
That's very true.
As opposed to us all being doing it. Within all of that, Ian, it's probably the unspoken about thing in golf is money. There's a lot of money floats around in golf. What part does that play in what you do and have done with your life? Players make the most money at the very top. They make the least money. The worst place to be in golf is good enough to bounce between the secondary tour and the main tour.
Yes.
Because you'd be better off working for a living, frankly, with what's involved in that. What part does that play in decision-making and where you end up in this game in some ways?
I think it's huge. I mean, I look at my own career, and I could have stayed out there a lot longer. And even though I was struggling with my game, I played the sort of Australian tour, which at that stage was I played probably 5 events in Australia, and then I went up to New Guinea and played and came back, and I actually paid my way. I never lost a penny, never made a penny, but I, being a secure sort of person who wanted some stability, my wife was working as a physio, but I couldn't stand that. I was probably a bit of old school. I didn't want to be relied on, by other people supporting me. So that would really affected me. And I think that's one area that some people would be very affected by. They, being out there trying to get going and the lack of money to keep going. And you win 5 cents and you hang in there, and it's not it's not a good thing.
You're swimming in it, aren't you?
Yes.
Let's say, for example, you're a player with a bit of talent. You might not come from great means, and you find yourself in you one day qualify for a PGA Tour event.
Yes,
there's every chance that the people you're standing on the tee with are millionaires.
That's right.
And there's
major
there's emotions
disparity.
Go with that, don't there? There's all sorts of things go with that.
Without a doubt. I think there's a lot of young guys and girls who have not gone forward because they've felt that they, can't earn enough out of the game. And especially in Australia. I mean, basically we're so minimal amount of events and the prize money is so small.
Imagine if you're a woman.
It's horrendous.
That much worse.
Yes, totally.
The prospects of becoming a professional golfer. Hats off to any Australian woman who's playing professionally anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
Because that takes an extraordinary amount of...
Well, young Karis at the moment has just flown back to Japan. She's been in quarantine for 2 weeks and her first tournament's coming up next week. And, just up there, got no one to talk to.
Playing in anonymity. Nobody from Australia knows what you. Very hard to find the scores, even if you're a mad keen golf fan.
Yep.
The information. I think she had to travel with an interpreter for the first year or two.
You have to have someone, a manager who's an interpreter as well. You cannot be up there. So hats off to her. She's just one tough lady to be able to go and do that. So
how important is that? And in that formative sort of years, how important is adversity and learning to deal with it? Does that make sense, that question? Is it important that you have some setbacks and learn to get... I think of Lee Trevino.
Yeah, fantastic, yeah.
The player that he became, and that's very tied up in his personality. Jack never had those sort of setbacks, yet he was obviously a great player as well. Are they important, those setbacks, or is that an individual?
I think individuals handle it very differently, I think. I think Karis is tough. I mean, to go and do what she's done up there already, but now it's even tougher going back there during COVID.
Having a bad time of it in Japan too, aren't they?
Oh, they are having a bad time, yeah. So she's, she just talking to her the other day, she's first time I've heard her down a little tiny bit, so hopefully she can, handle it better. But I think if you get through that and you develop that toughness, you certainly need it for pro sport. You need that toughness to be able to make it.
What happened to you early in your career with your playing and that sort of thing? Do you think that's helped you in this coaching career, with some of that adversity sort of idea? That
I think the only reason I became a good coach was the University of Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
Because I went on a searching mission. I had to find out why.
So there's a criticism that many will make of the modern system where the top amateur players are handed everything.
Yes, I mean, I think it's fine to hand them anything as long as they get some experience from it, in regard that, okay, they, make them book their own airfares, make them book their accommodation, make them do some certain things that are going to help them in their professional careers. But I think in Australia you need to do that. I think we're so far removed from the major tours and what have you that there's got to be some support system if we're going to keep the game producing in Australia, producing high-level players. I think we have to do it.
The public expects it, don't they? They expect that there will always be Australians performing well on the world stage in golf.
Absolutely.
To this point, we've done reasonably well, but it's not getting any easier, is it? Particularly with no home circuit to develop. For every champion, you've got to have a field for them to beat.
Absolutely. It's really difficult. So, you finish up with only producing one every blue moon. If that keeps happening, and we finish up with not getting many players unless we do support a whole crew. I think Golf Australia taking amateurs overseas and giving them experience in the deep end is pretty damn important.
Working more closely with the professional tour these days. We just saw an announcement the other day about that. Are you a supporter of that sort of thing?
Has to. Yeah, very, very much so. It has to all get together.
I mean, they're amateur in name only, aren't they? Let's be honest.
These days, yes. My word.
It's a misuse of the word, quite frankly, isn't it? It's really professional in waiting is probably a more accurate
very true
description of that. What's your overall sort of thoughts about golf? Are you optimistic about Australian golf?
I think so. I really feel as though there's lots of really good little junior tournaments going on in this state at the moment, even though we're sort of still in lockdown. But I think we've got to keep providing a few tournaments up the top end if we can, to keep the enthusiasm. Not necessarily the enthusiasm. I think majority of golfers these days watch the overseas tours, and so, but we need to have those for our own players to compete in and get better.
Pay TV's been a double-edged sword, hasn't it? It's fantastic to be able to watch the golf all the time, but what it means is if that's not what gets dished up at home, you feel like home golf is second-rate golf and people don't get off their bum and go and watch it and support it.
Absolutely. You
see those crowds in the 80s from televised tournaments. It's because that was the only golf people got to see, apart from maybe one or two of the majors on television.
That's so true. That's
now
what's so
spoiled.
Hard. We're spoilt totally.
If Tiger's not playing, it's not a proper tournament. That sort of mindset can sort of prevail.
Yes. Yeah. That's been happening for a while now. It's tough to...
Kind of blame Tiger for that, in fairness. Not his fault, but kind of is his fault for being just quite as staggeringly special as he was. We all got spoiled, really, didn't we?
Wow. Yes, so good.
You would have watched him play, I would imagine.
Yes, I actually got really lucky. I actually got him in... I went over to the US Open at Oakland Hills, and we've been over there with grades.
03? Jim Furyk?
No. Now,
Not the PGA
No, it's back.
Duffner one?
No, this is well before that. Even.
Oh, 80s?
Yes.
87 maybe?
Yes.
Did Price have a hole in one? 3 hole-in-ones on one of the holes there on the par 3s or something?
No.
Anyway,
Tiger was 19 years of age, and he played with...
Okay, so it must have been in the 90s.
Played with Jack and Palmer.
Oh.
So I got to watch... I walked 6 holes with them in the practice
Of course,
round.
96, yeah. He hit it in the water, hurt his wrist and withdrew. Wow.
So, it's... phenomenal.
Yeah,
just phenomenal. Yeah.
One of those players, isn't he? Do you watch golf differently to the rest of us? Do coaches watch the game differently? You mentioned Noel Blundell sort of could tell you before someone hit a shot he's going to hit a bad shot. Do you watch the game differently?
Yeah, I certainly do. Yeah, differently to what I used to. I don't take too much notice of the swings.
The commentators? No? Sound down? Is that what you do?
Oh, not necessarily. There's some good ones there, but I like I like just watching the emotions and what's going on and how they're going to handle the situation.
It's the part that television doesn't show us very well, isn't it? When you go out to watch the golf and you walk the course, you see so much more of the players and what they're actually feeling than when they cut to them on the tee, and all of that stuff's done, the temper tantrums and the screaming at the caddy and all the other stuff that goes with it. And all of that's really more important, isn't it?
I love watching that area and see how they can turn it around or not. Yeah.
Do you find yourself watching the golf and thinking, oh, I'd like to work with that player. I could fix them, for want of a better term, or I could make them better in a very short period of time?
Yes, I've actually said that a fair few times, watching. Yes, I do.
Do you ever go and approach that player and offer your services?
Never. No, I would never, ever do that. I basically just know that every player out there is working with their own coaches, and they'll have a list of things they're working on, and the last thing they need is for some old battered coach to come along and tap them on the shoulder and said, listen, I can fix you. They don't need that. They'll have a list of things they're working on themselves to self-improve.
I think the problem for you, Ian, you're too nice to have been a super good golfer. You haven't got the killer instinct. You need to go and grab
I did have.
Yeah, I can imagine you did. Well, in all seriousness, what role does that play? The killer instinct and being nice? And
I think you've still got to be... golf is still a gentleman's game, and you need to basically have good
fist
behaviour.
fighting on the tees in the qualifiers these days. Did you see that story yesterday?
Yes.
Fist fighting on the green.
That works well.
Yeah.
Dear, oh dear, that's certainly very different to our era. So, I still think it's, the game still needs the respect of what it's had. And I still think you can still have both. You can still look at a player and shake their hand and wish them all the best, but
not really mean
it.
Hope you play your best. I just hope I play that little bit better.
That's exactly right. Totally.
No greater joy than beating a player who played well. That's a real feather,
my word,
isn't it?
Totally.
A couple of things to finish up. You must have seen so many changes in the game in all areas, from the equipment to the coaching equipment to the TrackMan to the physiology, the physiotherapy, the biology of the body, and the things that you understand about biomechanics. Has it all been for the good?
No, it hasn't all been for the good. I think the game has gone backwards in a few areas. I think the equipment's far too levelling the field. I think it's basically with the ball being so, before it was so responsive to poor. If you hit the ball poorly, you got a poor result. You and I can still get poor results no matter what the ball's like.
I'll show you some poor results that maybe you haven't even ever seen before.
But so I don't like that the equipment's been able to do that. Golf courses have become way too long.
For us.
For us.
It's still too short for Elvis.
It's just crazy how far the young guys hit it today. I don't like all of that. I think that they've destroyed the records of what golf courses did produce because of that scenario. I think you need to be very careful of all the modern technology in regard to, it's got its place, and it can really help in giving back good information, but you wouldn't live and die by it. I think you've got to be so careful.
Every player carries a TrackMan these days, every player of any sort of note. What's your take on TrackMan? I imagine you use it, I assume.
Yes, TrackMan will be really good to help you with the modern equipment where you can change the shafts and the sort of things you do to improve the flight of that individual, which like I said to you, I have questions about that. Rather than in the olden days, they refined their swing patterns to produce the flight that was required.
You see what the ball does, change something and see what it does differently.
Absolutely. So they actually, produced the swing pattern to give you the ideal flights that they were chasing, whereas rather just go and change the equipment these days. So very different. I think if you on the range and you're living and dying by the 1 degree differences on the track, man, I think you're going down a poor track because you're getting far too much aware of what you're actually doing, rather than being more, instinctive and out with your vision and feels.
Playing golf swing rather than golf.
Absolutely. So, that's my thoughts. But if you use it smart, good luck to you.
Having worked with so many really good players, is there one common trait across all of them that you could point to? Do they all just all the different personalities, from Elvis to Karras to Soyonyu to Kari to John Senden to Rachel Hetherington, all totally different people. Is there a common trait?
Yeah, they all want to win.
Yeah.
Yes, they're all highly competitive.
Driven,
want to win, high work ethic, most of them. Don't accept poor.
From you or for that?
Yeah. Demand is huge. Can be, it's really interesting to watch the different personalities, but they've all got those sorts of traits. Yeah.
And what role can success play in that? Because being driven, then you achieve a goal. There could be some dangers there, can't there?
Well, without a doubt. I mean, you've got to. That's another thing. You've got to reset all the time. You've got to, keep chasing. It's as soon as you stop, someone's going to go straight past you. So they all tend to have good resets and keep striving.
Because the extraordinary thing to me about Tiger and Jack in particular is that to maintain the drive, to keep wanting to win, there's nothing left to amass, certainly for Tiger. He could have walked away after the scandal in 2010. He had more than enough money to live on for the rest of his life and another two.
Yes.
That drive, I don't know, can you
incredible.
Teach that, or you got to be born
I
with
think
that?
I think you're just born with that, and that's something you really want to achieve. So, yeah, they're just so driven, that sort of guy.
It's often said of those people, wouldn't matter what they picked to do for a living, they would get near the top of it.
Without a doubt.
Because of just mindset.
Yes, I agree with you.
Last couple of things. What do us amateurs do wrong mostly? Those of us that are genuinely hopeless at the game. You've seen enough of us. Is there anything simple you can tell us to help us?
Yeah, I think you've got to warm up nicely. When you go to the range, you've got to...
Sorry, you made your first mistake here, Ian. What do you mean go to the range?
Either that or even at home, just having a few swings before you head out. I mean, it's pretty tough. I mean, a lot of people living in apartments and things these days, but just getting some great feel of your body and arms working together, lovely coordination, and then nothing more than that, basically, just getting a feel of as your body's rotating, your arms are travelling with your body, and, if you can touch the ground, if you get a chance beside the tee, and then it's a matter of picturing what you want.
You haven't even mentioned the out of bounds, the water hazard down the left, the bunker short of the green.
None of that's there.
It all sounds so similar.
Yes.
I think in golf, the one overarching statement you can make is that everything about this game is easier said than done.
Without a doubt. I mean, the discipline required to play well is huge, and that's that's the tough part for all of us, is to actually, he said, go out there and feel your body-arm coordination. Okay, that feels good. But then stand up on the tee and say, well, please go straight. Yeah.
What did Montgomery say about the Ryder Cup? It was the first time in years he'd stood on the tee and thought to himself, for God's sake, just make some sort of contact. That's how nervous he was that that became an option. You might actually have an air swing here, which is
totally.
And then he no doubt striped it down the middle, because that's what they do. Last thing from me, you might have heard this word many times over your time. We all have said it. If I could just be more consistent, do we really want that as golfers? Is consistency something we should strive for? Yeah,
interesting question. I mean, if you can get consistency, you can play the game well. I mean, you just position the ball nicely, whatever length you hit it or whatever shape you hit, but you're consistent in your shape and you leave it wherever, and you can plot yourself around the course nicely and enjoy your day.
It's very vanilla, though, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, there's no real excitement in it, but
flop shots, driver across the water, the fun stuff that we play for.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think you can. I think on certain events you could actually go out there and say, okay, I'm going to go out and play today, and just see if I can be consistent. Use what I've got. My shape's this shape. I'm going to play it in position. But it is boring. I mean, you get to one hole and you think, oh man, if I just need to hit another 5 yards and I can get across it here.
Which is the job of the golf course, isn't it? Which you touched on earlier.
Absolutely.
To tempt you into those decisions.
Those challenges. My word.
Make.
Yeah.
This really is the last one. Do we take the game too seriously, all of us across the board?
Good question. I really, I think there's a lot of people who do take it too seriously, because you watch the club championship. I mean, they go out every Saturday. The card goes in the pocket, and they go and play, and they enjoy their day out there. And club championship, the whole week before, guys are turning up the range you haven't seen in a year, and the card goes in the pocket with championship on it, and it's like, come on, you get out there and the course has been mown, the greens are grease lightning, and you go up on the scoreboard and the scores are so high. So yeah, I think the whole thing is sometimes there's a group of people who certainly do take it very seriously.
If it stops being fun, it stops being golf. I think so.
I think you need to look at it that way, because it is a
supposed
tough.
to be the escape, isn't it? You work all week to have stress. Give yourself the weekend off to play golf.
What's the old saying? You don't play golf for relaxation. You relax to play golf.
You relax to play golf. That's exactly right. Lovely note to leave it on. Great advice for everybody. Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks very much, Rod. Yeah.
Real job. That's the sort of interview that you could go back and replay once a year, and you'll come away with a new nugget of wisdom every time that you've missed on the previous listen. As always, a big thanks to Ian for being so generous with his time and knowledge. That's it for episode 48, but I hope you've made the effort to follow or subscribe on your favourite podcast app, because there's a real treat in store for episode 49.
The next morning when I came to, which there's a very distinct difference between waking up and coming to.
Yes.
I sat on the edge of my bed going, what happened? I don't know how long I sat there. It was a while before I even remembered I won a tournament.
John Huggan catches up with one of the game's most recognisable voices, Roger Maltby. That's next time on The Thing About Golf.